Imagine for a moment that you're John Brennan. It's October 2015. You're the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, one of the most powerful people in American intelligence. You've spent decades in the shadows, orchestrating operations across continents, safeguarding national secrets. Your entire career has been built on control, on knowing things others don't, on staying invisible. And then, your personal email gets hacked by a high school student in his bedroom. The email that lands in a journalist's inbox contains your social security number, your wife's passport details, your application for top secret clearance, 47 pages documenting every vulnerability, every connection, every detail of your life that could be used against you. The most protected man in American intelligence exposed. Not by a foreign government, not by sophisticated operatives with unlimited resources, but by a 16-year-old from North Carolina who goes by the name Kraka. His real name is Andrew Boggs, but to understand how he pulled off one of the most embarrassing security breaches in modern American history, we need to talk about the person who led him there. A 31-year-old British man named Kane Gamble, who convinced himself he was fighting a war from his parents' house in Leicestershire, England. This is the story of how teenagers, armed with nothing but persistence and a deep understanding of human weakness, brought the American security establishment to its knees. And the terrifying part? It wasn't even that hard. Let's go back to the beginning. February 2015. Kane Gamble is living at home with his parents. He's unemployed, spending most of his time online, drifting through chat rooms and forums where young hackers congregate. He's overweight, socially awkward, struggling to find his place in the world. But online, he's someone else. Online, he's Kraka with attitude, a digital warrior, a voice for the voiceless. He's been radicalized, not by a terrorist organization, but by something more accessible, more insidious. The group he forms calls itself Krakas with Attitude, a deliberately provocative name borrowed from the legendary rap group, twisted into something confrontational. The acronym spells CWA. They're young, mostly teenagers, scattered across the United States and Britain. They communicate through encrypted channels, teaching each other techniques, sharing tools, building confidence. Their mission, as they see it, is to expose hypocrisy, to reveal the people behind America's drone program, to make the invisible visible. What they're actually doing is committing federal crimes. But here's what makes this story so unsettling. The techniques they used weren't sophisticated. They didn't exploit zero-day vulnerabilities or use advanced malware. They didn't need to. Because the greatest weakness in any security system isn't technological. It's human. The primary weapon in their arsenal had a name: social engineering. It's a term that sounds clinical, almost benign, but what it really means is lying, manipulating, exploiting trust and authority to trick people into giving you what you want. Think about the last time you called your phone company or your bank. What did they ask you to verify your identity? Your account number? Your mother's maiden name? Your date of birth? Information that, let's be honest, isn't that hard to find if someone's looking. Now imagine someone calls that same company, but they're pretending to be you. They've already gathered your basic information from public records, from social media, from data breaches that exposed millions of people's details. They sound confident, authoritative. They know the right words to say, the right frustrations to express. And the person on the other end of the line? They're just trying to get through their shift. They want to help. They're trained to be helpful. That's the crack in the armor. That's where it all falls apart. Kane Gamble understood this instinctively. He'd spent years studying it, practicing it, perfecting the art of sounding like someone he wasn't. He could mimic the casual authority of a tech support supervisor, the bureaucratic weariness of a government administrator. the urgent concern of a security officer dealing with an emergency. And it worked. Again and again and again, it worked. October 12, 2015. This is when they went after John Brennan, the CIA director, the ultimate prize. They started with his personal email, not his CIA account, but his AOL email. Yes, AOL. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency was using an AOL account for personal correspondence. Already you can see the problem. Boggs, the teenager from North Carolina, made the call. He contacted AOL customer service, claiming to be a Verizon technician. He had Brennan's personal details, his home address, his social security number, information that had been circulating in various leaks and breaches over the years. He sounded professional, calm, like he did this every day. The AOL employee believed him. Why wouldn't they? He had all the right information. He knew the protocols. And so they reset the account password. Just like that. The CIA director's email was theirs. Inside, they found everything. Draft SF-86 forms, the incredibly detailed questionnaires used for security clearances, contact lists of intelligence officials, personal correspondence, financial information, the architecture of a life. They leaked it all. To journalists, to WikiLeaks, posted samples on social media with mocking commentary. The group wasn't trying to be subtle. They wanted attention. They wanted the world to know that the emperor had no clothes. The response from the intelligence community was predictable. Embarrassment, outrage, a scrambling to contain the damage. But also something else. A creeping realization that if it could happen to John Brennan, it could happen to anyone. Jay Johnson, the Secretary of Homeland Security, James Clapper, the Director of National Intelligence, Mark Giuliano, the Deputy Director of the FBI. One by one, crackers with attitude targeted the people responsible for America's security apparatus. They didn't stop at email accounts. They called the FBI directly, pretending to be Verizon employees, and had call forwarding set up on the personal phones of senior officials. Suddenly, when someone called the deputy director of the FBI's personal line, it rang through to the hackers instead. They'd answer, record the conversations, mock the callers. They accessed Jay Johnson's Comcast account and obtained his wife's personal information, his home address, his viewing history. They found his Dropbox, which contained sensitive law enforcement files he'd been reviewing at home. The audacity was staggering. But what's more staggering is that none of this required exceptional technical skill. What it required was patience, research, the willingness to spend hours on the phone, cycling through customer service representatives until they found one who'd comply, and a complete disregard for consequences. Because here's the thing about Kane Gamble. He believed he was untouchable. He was in England, operating against American targets. He used VPNs, encrypted communications, pseudonyms. He thought the distance would protect him. But he was also reckless, arrogant even. He gave interviews to journalists, bragging about the hacks. He posted on social media, taunting his victims. He seemed to genuinely believe that what he was doing was righteous, that exposing these officials was a form of activism, of resistance. In one intercepted conversation, he told an associate, "I just think it's funny that we can do this to them. They're supposed to be the most protected people in the world." There's something almost childlike in that statement. A teenager, drunk on power he never should have had, wielding it like a toy. But the FBI wasn't amused. The investigation was massive. Multiple agencies working across continents, following digital breadcrumbs through layers of obfuscation. The hackers had been careful in some ways, careless in others. They'd use encryption, but then brag publicly about their exploits. They'd mask their IP addresses, but reuse certain phrases, certain stylistic choices that created patterns. And slowly, Methodically, the investigators closed in. In February 2016, British police raided Kane Gamble's home. He was 20 at the time, though he'd been a teenager when the hacks began. They seized his computers, his phones, his hard drives. The digital evidence was overwhelming. Months of chat logs, planning documents, stolen files. Andrew Boggs was arrested in North Carolina. Other members of the group were identified and apprehended. The international cooperation was swift and comprehensive. At trial, Gamble's defense tried to paint him as a naive young man, motivated by genuine political concerns about American foreign policy. He wasn't a criminal, they argued. He was an activist, misguided perhaps, but fundamentally driven by conscience. The prosecution saw it differently. They detailed the scope of the intrusions, the national security implications, the terror inflicted on the victims who found their most personal information exposed. They played recordings of Gamble laughing about the hacks, boasting about his access, treating it all like a game. The judge was unequivocal. In April 2018, Kane Gamble was sentenced to 2 years in prison. The judge told him directly, "You were motivated by some form of anti-American sentiment and felt that by doing what you did, you were serving the public interest. You couldn't have been more wrong." Andrew Boggs received a 5-year sentence in the United States. Other members of the group faced similar fates. But here's what haunts me about this story. Here's what should haunt all of us. It worked because the systems we've built to protect ourselves are designed for the wrong threats. We've invested billions in firewalls, encryption, intrusion detection systems, all focused on keeping the bad guys out of the network. But we've neglected the human element. The tired customer service representative who just wants to help. The assumption that someone with the right information must be who they say they are. After the crackers with attitude incidents, there were reviews, policy changes, enhanced training protocols. Two-factor authentication became standard. Verification procedures were tightened. The specific vulnerabilities they exploited were closed. But the fundamental problem remains. Because social engineering isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature of human nature. We trust. We want to be helpful. We take shortcuts. We reuse passwords because remembering dozens of unique, complex strings is exhausting. We put sensitive information in personal email accounts because it's convenient. And every single one of those human choices creates an opportunity. Think about your own digital life for a moment. Your email, your bank account, your medical records, your private messages. What would happen if someone determined enough, patient enough, decided to target you? What information is already out there, in data breaches, in public records, on your social media profiles, that could be used to impersonate you to a customer service agent? For most of us, the answer is probably enough. The difference is that most of us aren't interesting targets, but the officials who were hacked by Gamble and his crew, they should have been protected by layers of security that made this impossible, and they weren't. There's a broader lesson here about the mythology we've built around expertise and authority.